What was the first phone with OLED? In 2017, Apple released their first ever OLED iPhone, the iPhone 10, but this was not the first phone with OLED, believe it or not. In fact, the biggest criticism point of Apple in 2017 before they dropped the iPhone 10 is that they refused to switch to OLED because the first ever Android phone with OLED was the Samsung GTI 7500 from 2009. That is 8 years before the iPhone. In fact, every single Samsung Galaxy S since the S1 has been AMOLED. Believe it or not though, the first phone with an OLED screen as its main display was not an Android phone. It was actually a normal style phone from 2004 called the Samsung SGH X120. Notice how I said main display. The first Samsung phone ever with an OLED panel on it at all was the Samsung E700 with its outer screen, but not inner screen. And this came out in 2003. But you know what beat it just ever so slightly? That would be the LG G7030 from just 2 months prior in 2003, and this was the first phone with a color OLED on it, except it wasn't the first phone with an OLED still. Remember how I said the Samsung X120 was the first phone with an OLED as its main display? I lied, but I'll explain in a second. That would actually go to the Motorola Timeport 8767 from 2000. In fact, this phone is so old that it actually predates the term OLED. It's still OLED, but back then they called it OEL. But also another thing is, this phone didn't have a full color OLED. It was tricolor, which is still pretty decent. You can still see green, blue, and orange, but it's not a full color OLED. So while the Motorola was the first ever OLED phone, most people are still going to tell you the X120 just because it's the first phone with the main OLED screen that's in color.